so this video is going to talk about the types of data collection. So most of them you've heard before, probably maybe even all of them. So our learning target is I can interpret different types of data collection. Alright, so for data collection, there are 4 major categories for collecting data. Number 1 is a census. Number 2 is sampling, which we've already talked about in this class. Number 3, experiment. And you've already dealt with those in science classes and things. And then number 4 is my favorite, observational study. Because I like to watch people and see what happens. Alright, so there are your 4 major categories. Okay, so for a census, an explanation would be a study that obtains data from every member of the populations, which is what the census tries to do, but here's your pros and cons. Not practical, because you're trying to get data from everybody, and I don't even open my door when the census comes around. Don't tell anybody. But it's valuable because every member is a part of the population. So every member is a part of the population. So everybody gets a vote. But if you're like me, I don't even fill those things out. Don't tell anybody. So really you're not sampling everybody. It's kind of impractical to try to get everybody to fill out something. Alright, the next one is sampling. Alright, so a sample is going to be, it obtains data from a subset of a population. So it's not trying to get everybody, it's just trying to get a pretty good sample. So here's the pro. It's more feasible than the census, because you're not trying to track down everybody in the world. But, I mean, you're not taking everybody, so there is room for error. And we actually call that a margin of error, and we'll talk about that later. Alright, so the next one you should be pretty familiar with, an experiment. Alright, so an experiment is a controlled study that attempts to understand cause and effect relationships. Usually there's like an experimental group, and then there's a control group where you compare. So this would be the best method for causal relationships. That's not casual, that's causal. Like what's causing it is where that comes from. But it can be difficult to control all factors. So, difficult to control all factors. And then the last one is your observational study. Alright, so that's the study that cause and affect relationships through observation. The problem with that is it's not going to be random selection, so no random selection, because you're just kind of looking at everything. And then the results of an observational study to a larger population can be a problem, just because it's not random. But those are your 4 main ones. That's a little explanation of both of them, and then you have pros and cons for each one of them. Okay, so let's look at some examples, and then you can write your own. So an example of a census, we might want to survey early college students on what theme they want for prom. Alright, and we would survey every student, and then we just analyze, interpret, and draw conclusions from that data. So you can write your own, something like that. Alright, if we were going to sample, let's say we would survey 30 EC students on theme for prom. So we wouldn't ask everybody in the school, because maybe we just couldn't get to everybody, or we didn't care, and we just took 30 of them. So that would be a sample of the total population, so you can write your own. An experiment. So I could find 10 seniors, and I can see if studying affects grades in math. So we would have a control group, and we would have an experimental group, and we would compare. So you can come up with your own type of experiment. And the last is an observational study. All right. So we could just find 10 seniors, and we could just watch their grades and study habits. So we wouldn't have a control group to compare it to. We would just be watching them and see what kind of data we could analyze. All right, so that's your main 4. They're pretty easy. If you have any questions, let me know.